Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Tottenham Way. I'm Tom Barclay of The Sun. I'm joined by Tom Allnutt in The Times in my car. This is maybe something we may carry on with. Let's see how it goes, Tom. We're in one shot, at least. That's quite exciting.
Yeah.
Don't know about the sound. Sending my microphone over to you throughout, so apologies to anyone watching whether it doesn't work or not, but let's see. Anyway.
We're in the stadium car park, would you say?
Absolutely.
I think we're maybe one of the last cars here, aren't we? So.
Yeah, to the bitter end. Anyway, we've just obviously watched Tottenham draw 2-2 against Brighton, coming back from 2 goals down in the polar opposite of last season where they were 2-0 up at half-time and ended up losing 3-2. This one, they didn't quite win, but they fought back in what was a really spirited fight back. And that's probably the best place to start, Tom. In the press conference afterwards, Thomas Frank said it was the most complete performance under him so far in what was his 7th game. And personally, I have to agree. It was definitely most fun to watch, I would say. Albeit, obviously, there was the Man City win, which was the standout result so far. What did you make of his comment and the performance overall?
Yeah, he was really positive, wasn't he, in the press conference afterwards? And I think, actually, we were sitting next to each other watching the match. And the first thing to say was it was a really fun game, wasn't it, to watch? It was a really kind of thrilling match. And I found that quite refreshing, I have to say. I think we've both sort of said recently how it feels like the Premier League is becoming quite kind of all about set pieces and structure and control. And actually, you know, this felt like a real throwback. I said to Frank, actually, in the press conference, I said, you know, did you enjoy the game? Like, as a manager, you know, you obviously want games to be sort of very tactical and calm. And could you enjoy the kind of like the up and down nature of this match? You know, it rained, didn't it, in the last kind of 15 minutes, and it felt like a sort of almost like an old school Premier League match. Lots of chances, both teams going for it, but in a very kind of different way, I thought. You know, I think Brighton obviously like sat deeper and hit Spurs much more on the break, where Spurs dominated the ball a lot more, and I would say felt like they were kind of in charge of the contest overall, even if Brighton, I think, probably were more dangerous with the chances. So I can see why Frank, you know, was very optimistic afterwards. You know, I think Spurs played well with the ball. I think they pressed very well. They were very aggressive. I think what he really liked, and he mentioned this a lot, didn't he, in the press conference, where he was talking about that sort of fight and toughness. Mentality, yeah, he said, didn't he? And he said this after Villarreal, I thought, which was a nice little phrase, where he said, sort of doing the tough job, you know. And I think he even said, didn't he, with the recovery runs gave me goosebumps. Is that,
yes, that was what he said. I mean, it was interesting because in my head, as soon as they came back to 2-2 from 2-0, I just couldn't help but think of the parallels to last season with when they were 2-0 up at half-time and obviously threw it away. And it was interesting to see Frank actually reference that game in his press conference unprompted. He said last season we were 2-0 up and we lost 3-2. And bear in mind, before the game, he'd been asked, you know, have you watched any of these previous games with Brighton in the last few years, because obviously Spurs have had not a great record and conceded a lot of goals, and he said he hadn't watched any of them. He just watched a bit of Brighton this season to get a feel for where they're at this year, along with some other performances that he felt were relevant last season. But him bringing it up, I was quite surprised by and interested by, and it was a sort of point he wanted to make about that resilience that the team showed. And I mean, one of the final points I wanted to make with this podcast, but I want to bring it on now, is we are in the sort of honeymoon period of a new manager. And we've been here before with Ange, with Nuno, with many other managers where they often start pretty well at Tottenham. But I don't know, they're showing different sides to their character that feels like it's the start of something rather than a really good start, if you know what I mean. Like, the football itself it's all been about the defensive base, the structure that they've built from, which he was talking about in the press conference before, without really getting there, without it really clicking yet, I suppose, from an attacking point of view. And I kind of agree with that. That's what's exciting, is that once that starts to hopefully really kick in, and you get the likes of Xavi Simons, who we'll come on to in a minute, you know, hopefully lighting up at number 10, and the likes of Kudus and Richarlison and all the other attacking players really starting to gel a bit more. And that's really exciting. But to have this defensive base coupled with the mentality and the spirit that we saw today, it does bode well, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think there were two sort of types of, you know, fight that I think we could see on the pitch there. And we mentioned in the press box at Brighton, you know, it's quite low down. It's always a bit like the old White Hart Lane, where you feel like you're kind of seeing the match through the players' shins and thighs, and you kind of like hear the real sort of boom boom of the tackles and the passes, don't you? And I think you could see, I mean, Frank said before the match, he said, before the game, I told the players this is going to be a match about mentality. It's going to be about fight and resilience and grit. It's not going to be about the tactics and all the things that we like as coaches. It's going to be about really digging in. And I think you could see that in the sense of the duels, the 50-50s, the way Spurs really competed. There were a couple of like little flash points, weren't there, where kind of Richarlison got involved in a little pushy at one point, Romero as well. I thought Spurs were up for it today. They were really up for it. They weren't kind of pushed over. And I don't want to kind of like always sort of tar Ange with kind of like a broad sweep brush, because there were games under Ange where Spurs were similarly up for it and, blew teams away with intensity. So, let's not kind of rewrite history.
Agreed.
But I do think that I feel like that was the kind of match where I don't think Postecoglou's Tottenham necessarily would have fought back to win, to get 2-2.
No, I think in the Premier League.
I was just going to say,
in the Premier League in particular.
Correct, yeah.
Last season, at least.
Because I think there were two types of resilience there, is what I was going to say. One is the sort of like in the game, the kind of the duels and the 50-50s, Spurs are right there, and then clearly to come back from 2 down. And also, I think, particularly with the second goal, because there was a point where Spurs, after the half-time, were really on top for 10-15 minutes. But actually, Brighton kind of weathered that storm, didn't they? And it was only when kind of Frank brought on Xavi Simons in that last 10 minutes, I think it would have been easy for Spurs to almost kind of think, this is getting away from us, this game. We're sort of losing the thread here. But they didn't. They kept going, they kept knocking on the door, and eventually got through.
Yeah, it's interesting what you say about the sort of physicality and the bumps and seeing everything up close. Well, I've done Brighton games here at the Amex. You can probably put them all together, and I've probably done them more than pretty much all the other teams. Sorry, but all the other matches I've been to at other clubs, and it'll be close between all of those matches I've been at live, other games, other teams, and Brighton. I've been here so many times over the years because I used to cover them a lot, and I don't remember noticing that as much as I did today. It was very noticeable how you could almost feel like the sort of sinewy performance of like every player like crashing into each other, and it wasn't a dirty game by any stretch, but there was a lot everyone's sort of blood was kind of up, including the fans. I don't know if it was just a few challenges, Richarlison being a little bit like he can often be, trying to win challenges here and there and sort of pissing off the opposition at times, but it was really notably different compared to a lot of matches I've seen here before, and I think that must come from the manager and the coaching staff towards Spurs, and Huertzler for Brighton as well, and how much, to their credit, they got them both up for it. It was a really old school kind of battle that was I really enjoyed it throughout the match.
Even the coaching staff on the side, I mean, we were quite close to the dugouts, weren't we? And it's such a contrast from what went before. Frank, for being this sort of very friendly Scandinavian chap, he actually on the side, he's quite animated, isn't he? In terms of the ref, I mean, like he does complain when decisions go against them. He does like throw his fist through the air sometimes. He does, get into sort of spats with the fourth official. Like he's not shying away from that. And also the other members of the coaching staff as well. Cochrane was in there as well today. Wells as well.
Yeah,
it's a very active bench, and I think maybe at the Spurs stadium you don't always get that sense so much, but today you could really see how the players sort of feed off that, I think.
Yeah, there was a couple of moments actually that stood out. So when there was one moment where Richarlison is going for a high ball with Kadioglu, I think it is, and he catches Kadioglu almost like in the throat, and the fans were sort of chanting red card at that point, but Richarlison was protesting instantly that he just whacked into his back, which I think that happened. But suddenly the sort of level of how animated both benches were, and the sort of animosity of both benches was quite stark. You think, as you say, of Frank and the coaching staff being quite measured and calm, but it didn't look like there was a lot of love lost there. And then later on, I don't know if the fans were giving Cochrane a bit of not abuse, but telling him what they thought, and he was almost saying, it looked to me like he was saying, leave that alone. And then at one point, Bentancur, who'd been subbed off, comes over to basically the side of the pitch to tell Porro to calm down. And it was that kind of how much everyone was so engaged with the match, and to the point of being ultra competitive, probably underlined why it was such a gripping watch, particularly in that second half when the goals were going in. I mean, we should probably go through it a little bit, the goals themselves. We talk about the harking back to Ange in a sort of compare and contrast kind of way, in the way that they obviously threw it away from 2 goals up last season and came back here. But the high line that they displayed, particularly in the first half, was to me a bit of a return to what we saw a bit last year. And he got, to be honest, it got exposed in a similar way to what we saw a lot last season. What did you make of that?
Yeah, it felt very reminiscent of the kind of early Ange days at least when, you know, Van der Ven, Romero constantly turning on their heels and sort of racing after someone, you know, that was the sort of first 20, 30 minutes. And obviously that was what created the first goal, the Minter goal. He wins it off Odegaard, does really well to kind of keep running, goes past Van der Ven wasn't he? He was onside by basically a shoulder,
wasn't it? Yeah.
And then did a really good finish. And to be honest, there were a couple of other times where Brighton went through in the first half and didn't quite find the final pass. So I guess I'm slightly split on that, because I think Frank would say, you know, the tactic paid off because he was trying to squeeze the space. And obviously he really mentioned that pressing was aggressive, man to man. You know, we did that really well and we nicked the ball off Brighton, which is true. And Brighton are one of the best teams at playing out from the back in the league, you know. So to press them like Spurs did today and to make them feel as uncomfortable as Tottenham did, I think is a real feather in the cap of the kind of pressing pattern and how they're making that really cohesive so early on. The flip side of that is that by pressing so high and, you know, pushing the defensive line so high, it did look like Brighton could get through, didn't it? There were 3 or 4 times where they went through. And I always felt that as soon as Spurs gave away a ball, Brighton knew. I don't know if they sort of came prepared for this tactic, or maybe they just watched the videos from last season, but they knew 1, 2, 3 pass, get that ball in behind early. You know, make people run and get into a foot race. And it could have done for Spurs, couldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like that plays into Brighton's hands generally when you look at Minter and his pace. Mitoma, who actually was quite quiet today, which is to Spurs' to their credit. I thought Root is an interesting player, isn't he? Like, I was speaking to Matt Barlow of the Daily Mail and we were trying to work out what kind, because he's a really technically good footballer, but it's almost like he would have been better suited in old school, 2 men up top playing just off someone. But they caused Spurs issues, particularly in that first half.
So was it a good defensive display?
Yeah.
You know, because for me it was probably the loosest I've seen them almost under Frank. You know,
it was a bold strategy.
The XG, for example, Brighton were only sort of 1.6 and Spurs were 1.3 or whatever. So it wasn't as if Brighton had 3 or 4 goals where golden chances, but they looked like they could score more than they did. And I think a better, more clinical team probably would have done. But then maybe Spurs wouldn't have played like that against a better, more clinical team.
To me, it was just another interesting example of Frank mixing up his tactics, which we've seen in pretty much every game so far, which, you know, makes for people who particularly love that side of football analysis. It is fascinating to see what he's going to do next. And often it's in ways that I probably, not that I'm by any stretch the greatest tactical mind, but sometimes it makes me think, I wasn't expecting that. Like I said, that high line almost seems to play into Brighton's hands. Maybe it did in a way, but it just means that every time you kept guessing over what he's going to do.
I mean, the alternative, for example, I think we said this during the match, would be rather if Spurs had played deeper, not had people scuttling in behind all the time. But then what? You let Brighton have the ball, you know, and then we say, well, look, why are they not playing higher? Why are they not pressing them? Why are they not getting into, you know, disrupting their rhythm? And Brighton having 70% possession and dominating the match, because they can also do that. So it's not an easy one. I can sort of see where Frank's coming from on it.
Definitely. A second goal, it's a mistake, isn't it, from Vicario? I mean, Bergvall, first of all, sort of gives the ball away, a little bit sloppy. Bergvall's been unbelievable so far this season, particularly in the last 2 games, so definitely not going to sort of hammer him, but he was probably a bit quieter today. I don't know if that was a tactical thing as well, but anyway, in that moment, then Ayari picks up his fellow Swede, hits a very good strike, but I think from there, I'm not a goalkeeper, but to be fair, Frank afterwards, even he himself said that Vicario would be kicking himself for not keeping that one out, and that's probably fair, isn't it?
He said he'd kind of talked to him and said, you know, you should have kept that one out, didn't he? Then he was kind of quick to say, but he's had a great season, I'm very happy with him, and it happens, you know. I mean, I thought it was 3 mistakes, I've got to say. I thought it was a really soft goal, because actually it started with Richarlison. I can't remember who it was who played the ball into Richarlison. Richarlison had a sort of mixed game today, because I felt he did get into that sort of phase where it's sort of old Richarlison, where he got very into falling down very easily, got very into sort of complaining to the referee. I thought he wasn't really concentrating on the stuff he needs to be concentrating on. He got into that kind of mental mode where he just felt like he was being pushed all the time, and the referee wasn't. He was a bit aggy, and when he's in that kind of, when he's in that frame of mind, I don't think you see the best of him.
Do you think he gets distracted in games by getting into little?
I like him when he gets strong, you know, and he gets big, and he sort of thinks I can hold this guy off. I don't like it when he starts falling to the ground all the time and looking for free kicks, you know, and that happened there. He fell to the ground too easily. It wasn't a foul. It wasn't a free kick. He complained about it, and Brighton were away. And then the second one, I mean, I thought Bergvall was off it today. Actually, I think quiet is generous. I just didn't think he had his best game, which is fine. You know, he's a young player, and we're going to have the ups and downs. But I just thought his pass selection, I thought, was off. His execution was a couple of crosses that he tried, are just really overhit. I just didn't think he was quite in it.
Interesting to see Sarr not start. I think it's the first time that's happened under Frank, and I think it was noticeable, actually.
Yeah.
Not saying he wasn't due a rest because he's had so many games, so you can understand, but it almost reminded you how far he's come under Frank and how key a player he's been already.
But Odegaard as well, was the kind of rotation, wasn't he, in that we were also saying, oh, that's interesting in the lineup. And I didn't think he really took his chance.
No,
either.
But what was interesting about that was I think we were all talking about how we presumed he'd be going off at half-time. And admittedly, they did get the goal just before half-time, so that maybe changes things.
Which he was involved in.
And if they'd gone 2-0 down, if they'd gone into the break 2-0 down, then maybe he might well have come off. But to be fair, he stayed on for a while in the second half, and Frank gave him a chance. And there was one... You say he didn't take his chance, and I probably broadly agree with you, but there was one moment where in the second half where he gets in down the left and fires a really good ball in that Bergvall just doesn't quite get to. And that was okay. It's not, it's nothing to write home about, and he's got a long way to go still. But as a young player trying to find his way in, it was more interesting than anything that Frank didn't just sort of go, right, got to start, off you come. Got to try something else. It's not working. He was showing a bit of faith in him, I thought. And
he switched them, didn't he, him and Kudus for a while. Yeah. They played in different flanks. And I actually thought Oliver looked better on the right than he did on the left. So
that was when he scored his 2 goals, wasn't it? Against Alkmaar. That was just basically his moment last year because obviously he was injured for so long. He was off the right and he took them really well. So there is a case to be said that maybe he's better over there. But let's be honest. I mean, we're going to get onto Kudus, but Kudus has got that right side absolutely locked down. I've been loving watching him all season. And it was quite interesting, actually, because I asked Thomas Frank about what's impressed you most. And the things that he said were basically all the things we've been talking about. But I guess because it's kind of obvious watching him, it's just the way he holds on to the ball so well. It's like having a centre forward out wide who can just make sure he keeps possession and gives everyone a breather and gets everyone a chance to get and make runs. He's so strong in that way, and also the way he can just drop his shoulder and the skill he has. It's funny, like you'd think all the opposing teams will have probably will have known about Kudus long before to this season anyway. But if they're basing it purely on watching his performances so far, they'll know it's coming that he's going to do that. And he just manages to do it. I mean, I think you were talking about it. We were chatting about this at maybe the West Ham game the other day, and you were talking about perhaps his low centre of gravity is the key to being able to do that. What do you think?
Yeah, it's the shift. He's so good at going one way and the other. It's almost as if he always backs himself to beat someone over. I'm not even saying 5 yards, over 1 yard. He'll stop and then go, and then he'll go the other way, and that acceleration he has from 0 miles an hour to whatever it is, 20 maybe, in the space of 2 yards. He does that really quickly.
Although, funny enough, I think if he was lightning quick, he would be right to the top. I think his speed of thought is very impressive, and his sort of ability with the ball. But I don't know if he's absolutely electric, and that might be the difference.
But then I think that's why he has to. I suspect that's why he's more skillful as a result.
Yeah, I suppose so.
Coming through, he's probably realised I'm not always going to be able to beat people just lights out in a sprint. So I have to develop my game where I can beat people in different ways, and he does that by basically disguising. He shapes to go one way, goes the other. He can deliver a ball off either foot. That's what's the beauty of it. He can go to line and pull it back with his right, or he can cut inside and do it with his left. I mean, you can cover both Tottenham goals by talking about Kudus because he set them both up. The second one he cuts in on his left and puts in a really good curving cross, which Palhinha does or doesn't get a flick on, but it comes off Dan Heck in the end. And then, for the first goal, it's his shot, which Richarlison controls and sticks in. I thought he was, by quite a distance, Tottenham's best player and probably best player on the pitch.
Well, on that front, Spurs have had lots of signings over the years. Some have come off, some have not so much. It's obviously early days for Kudus, but one of the things I will say is he's consistently been very good in all of his, pretty much all of his games. Some he's had more impact than others. Obviously, Bournemouth was bad for everyone, and he was kind of shackled a bit in that game. But overall, he's been consistently good. From what you've seen so far, how does he compare to some of the bargain buys and best signings that Tottenham have made? I know it's way too early to say, but what are you thinking?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to expand too much because, you can go back a long way and there have been some really good ones which everyone will know about. But I think if we just think about the last few years and the signings that Spurs have made in this position, it's getting really dark.
It's getting really dark. I'm trying to see if any lights come on, but I don't.
For people listening on the pod, our lighting is now very low. Me and Tom look like we're...
There's nothing much I can do about it. You don't want to hear my car turn on, so let's just carry on, Tom. And for those of you on YouTube watching us, By the end of this pod, you won't be able to see us, but that's how it goes.
I think in comparison to the signings they've made in this position, in recent years, where I think they've tried quite a few players and it hasn't quite worked, he so far looks like, he could be that signing that we talked about for a long time, where he could be a game changer out wide for them.
Definitely. And then on to another signing, Xavi Simons came off the bench. And if you're just watching the highlights tonight, you're probably going, he's missed 3 decent chances. I think the third one in particular was the best chance, and it wasn't a great. It was again from another Kudus pass, and it was not a great shot. The second one, it was a good shot. It was a very good save from Verbruggen, and it wasn't like his end product based on the stats were actually that good, but how involved he was, how much he made a difference playing that number 10 role. That's got to be something that a lot of Tottenham fans are going to be really excited about.
Yeah, you're right. The end product was slightly off, like that one. It was the one where Kudus pulled it back for him. I think it's Bergvall who sort of dummies it. It was a really nice move. And he was just coming onto his right foot. And he sort of skews it, doesn't he? He kind of tries to whip it, and actually he skews it wide. And you'd imagine, someone with his kind of technical quality, I think, would be disappointed with that. But you're right. I think the game changed when he came on. It was that period, as I said before, where Spurs were slightly lagging and slightly running out of ideas. And he came on and just sort of lifted the place. He really kind of brought a new energy, a new spark about Spurs' play. He gave the ball out to the right for the goal, which Kudus then crossed in. He looked a lot more comfortable, I thought, in the centre, didn't you?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's his best position. He said himself, we talked to him in the mix zone after the Villarreal game, I think it was, and he said, number 10 is where I've always played. Although in recent years I have played a bit more on the left, but that's clearly where he's most comfortable. And to be honest, watching him today, it made me give even more sort of credit to what Thomas Frank's done so far, because it just reminded you that they haven't actually had a number 10 pretty much throughout the start of the season. And yes, some of the performances have been really good results-wise and really solid, but not exactly the most imaginative performances so far. Well, not surprising. He hasn't really had the creativity to be able to deal with it. And he still dug out those results. So kind of back to my original point about, hopefully this being not just a good start like we've seen in the past on the Spurs managers, this being a platform on which to build that can actually be something that can last. That in particular is really exciting, that the idea that they can have a number 10 to come in, particularly with the way Frank can adapt his tactics and really elevate their end product in the final third of the pitch.
Before we wrap up, because it's, we're almost in pitch black, before we finish, we should say that everyone who is listening to us on pod, try us on YouTube, because we are on YouTube now, and we're really pleased, haven't we, with our kind of subscriber building up. Where we are now, 700 or something, 600?
Not far off, yeah. I mean,
so we're pushing for 1,000.
We're trying our best to keep going there. I mean, admittedly, people who might be turning it on at this point may go, "What is this?" It's basically I can't see anything.
We're not getting subscribers with this video.
Yeah, definitely. It's probably more audio based, this podcast, but there you go. But yeah, we're obviously, as we've said before, we're trying to sort of grow that kind of community over there. We love all the comments that are coming in, your opinions, whether they be good, bad, or whatever about Spurs, whether it be about us. We sort of embrace it all. And where can the guys find us? As well as YouTube, which is at the Tottenham Way Pod on YouTube.
Yeah, and then if you want to email us, it's the tottenhamwaypod@gmail.com. So send us any questions, because we might do a sort of Q&A section at least in the next pod. So if you've got any questions or comments or anything you disagree with, then do let us know. But yeah, if you're watching on YouTube, please do subscribe, do give us a like, and that really helps us out.
It does. Let's just wrap up with a couple of final points. One, we've got to mention Destiny Udogie. It's kind of surprising we haven't mentioned him yet, given that he was very, very good, and the praise that Frank had for him after the game was quite eye-catching. Like he called him exceptional, and then unstoppable, or almost unstoppable. Now, obviously, this is a player who has had to bide his time to get back into the team. He's obviously had injury problems. So whether those words are sort of, particularly, Frank really want to give him an extra boost, or that's what he genuinely thinks. I thought he was very good. I was asked by, I think, Marcus in a recent pod that if it was I think it was Marcus, if it was you, apologies, if it was a Champions League final, tomorrow, who would you start at left back? And I went with Udogie because I think he's a great player, but I like the natural balance of
you're feeling vindicated now, aren't you? You're feeling that's why you're bringing that up.
I think Spence is great, and as Frank said afterwards, he's got 3 fantastic fullbacks, but I don't know. Is it just a classic? Is it an ideal situation for the most horses for courses manager that I can think of in Thomas Frank, in the way he mixes it up, to have these three excellent fullbacks who all have different skill sets. And it will just be whatever the challenge that lays ahead of them. If they're all fit, that will determine who gets to play and who doesn't. Yeah,
and I mean, I think Udogie was great today, and obviously Spence can play on the right as well. You know, it's not just a straight fight between between Spence and Udogie. You know, it's a three-way fight almost for two spots. I thought he played really well, Udogie. It was great to see him back because there were times last season where he wasn't at his best. You know, like a lot of players in that squad. But I thought he was really back to his kind of barnstorming best today. You know, strong and powerful going forward, but also really diligent defensively. I mean, I said to you early on, didn't I, that I thought he looked trim. You know, that maybe he'd lost a little bit of weight. He looked a bit sort of more like wiry almost, because before he was never overweight. I wouldn't say that, but I just think he looked a little bit more kind of like lean than he was last season.
Well, I'm laughing because I then said, well, you know, wearing black is quite a slimming colour. You know, that's what people often say when they're trying to look a bit slimmer. But I don't know, like maybe. He was always absolute, you know, unit and physically so impressive. But maybe.
I think what Frank said afterwards was probably 70% man management. You know, I think he was saying, you've had a bit of a slow start to the season. Spence has been playing ahead of you. You've had a tough few months, probably overall, like a lot of players. And he's trying to get him right on side and right up for the next match.
I think fans.
But he did play well.
He did. But like when you've done enough of these press conferences, you often sort of, it's always quite curious you always note when a manager goes almost overboard with praise or doesn't say anything, and you think, well, what's the reason? And often it's like a motivational tactic either way, whether it be not wanting to go too far, particularly with a young player, you know, hype them up too much, or for someone who's maybe needing a bit of confidence.
Yeah, it's smart.
But he was very good, and that as is that kit, by the way. Absolutely love that away kit. It's very sharp. Right, we better wrap it up because I can't even see either of us now in this video. So don't know what I mean. Maybe we can sort the lighting out afterwards. I don't know. But anyway, guys, we're going to be doing a pod this week, no doubt. Ahead of Doncaster. And like Tom said, love to hear all your comments. Let us know what you thought of this game. And the Frank engine rolls on with another good performance, another good result.
Yeah, I mean, I think we would say overall, really good match, fair result. I think, you know, okay, it's only a point, but Brighton's a difficult place to go. And from being 2-0 down, I think Spurs massively come out with positive feelings about the game overall.
Absolutely. Cheers, guys.
Thank you. Cheerio.